Hey guys, welcome to Sitting with Sean, episode 2. I am your host, Sean. In this episode, I'm going to share my story of recovery, where I've been, what I did that led me into recovery, and what I'm doing to stay sober now. Now, it's going to be a long story, so sit back, relax, get yourself a cup of tea, cup of coffee, some water, maybe a snack, and I hope you enjoy. My name is Sean. I'm a person in long term recovery. What does that mean? That means that I have not put a mind altering substance in my body since December 7th, 2019. Now, that's not my sober date that I claim to be my sober date, but I'll explain that later. So I was born July 11th, 1988 in Glen Burnie, Maryland, or Prince George's County, Maryland. I don't remember much of my childhood, as most children don't. There's tidbits that I remember, like I remember watching professional wrestling, like I stated in the episode 1, huge professional wrestling fan. I started watching wrestling at a very young age. My very first memory in life is Andre the Giant versus Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania. Um, and I remember being a little ham. I had all these action figures, and it seemed like I was always the one to be praised when I was a kid. I had a younger sister at the time that I knew of. Well, she's still alive. She's still with us by the grace of the gods. Um, but she was about 18 months younger than I am. And I really don't remember much of her, to be completely honest. Um, my life, when it comes to trauma, I would say that trauma has always been a part of my life from being a little kid all the way to now. Trauma's been a part of my life. My very first trauma that I remember is being about 3 or 4 years old and being in the bathroom and playing in the tub, splashing around. I had this Macho Man squirt gun, and I used to splash around and play around. And my dad was home at the time, and he came in and seen that I had gotten water all over the floor, as most little kids do, and he took a belt to me. Now, this was in the early 90s. So, a lot of what was happening in the early 90s would now be considered child abuse. That being said, I blocked a lot of that memory out because it was very traumatic to me, and I just didn't want to remember my childhood being like that. So I blocked a lot of that memory out. It wasn't until later on in my life that certain things started popping up in my brain, or somebody would tell me something and I would remember it. So when I was about 4 years old, shortly after the belt incident, we had a knock at our door, and my dad answered the door, and it was child services. And child services came and was looking around at my sister and I, and they seen bruises on me. They seen my sister, who was just a baby, had bruises on her from head to toe, and so they removed my sister and I from the house, and we were placed in foster care. And it wasn't very long that we were placed in the actual foster care before we got picked up, and I would say a matter of hours. Before I left the house, before I left my mom and my dad's house, um, my my mom said, "Take care of your sister. You're her protector now." And so, from that moment forward, I made it a duty to protect my younger sister. Her name is Missy, and I love her to death. Um, but we got placed into foster care with our foster parents. They were much older, uh, late 60s, maybe early 60s. I'm not too sure, but they were a church family, and that's where we got introduced into religion. And I'm not going to go into religion here because that's not the purpose of this podcast. But so we got placed under foster care, and every night they would put me and my sister to bed. They would wake up to find me outside of her crib as her protector. And that's how it remained until the moment that we got the knock on the door saying that My grandparents on my father's side were going to be taking us to live at their house. And we weren't there for any more than 6 months. And that whole 6 months was awesome. We got anything that we wanted. So we moved to our grandparents' house in Sharpsburg, Maryland. Now, if you guys know anything about Maryland or Sharpsburg, Sharpsburg is the home of the Antietam battlefield, where the bloodiest battle in all of the Civil War happened. A lot of men lost their lives on that day in September. And I absolutely loved living in the area. Very rich in history. So we end up moving to our grandparents' house, and we went to a public school at first. I was in kindergarten, and I went to a public school in Sharpsburg. But my grandmother didn't think that I was ready to move on to the first grade, so I was held back, and rightfully so. I feel like I wasn't ready either. So we ended up going to a Christian school that next year, Faith Christian Academy in Martinsburg, West Virginia, which was about a 45-minute drive from my grandparents' house. But my grandma and my grandpa, mostly my grandma, drove us to school every day. It was a very heavy Christian school, but I didn't really fit in. And when I mean I didn't fit in, um, everybody had friends that lived close to them. They lived in Martinsburg or in the surrounding areas. I lived 45 minutes away. My closest friend was a young girl by the name of Sabrina. And the only reason we were friends was because her parents went to church with my grandparents and with me. We grew up in the backwoods of Maryland. And in the backwoods, anything goes, right? Now, nothing crazy like um, sexual assault or anything. Nothing of that caliber happened. But my grandfather was uh, the enforcer, and my grandmother was the dictator. My grandma, I love my grandma to death, but she's a very narcissistic person, and my grandfather kind of fell for that. My grandmother didn't like when we would get B's or C's, and my grandfather would enforce whatever punishment he felt fit. And school, we worked on a tally system where green is you were like talking in class, and red is you're on the verge of being suspended or expelled from school. And it got to the point where, however many tallies we got, we would get a swat on the butt, or in my sister's case, two swats in the butt. My grandfather was a Vietnam veteran Marine, and he had very thick hands, very heavy hands too. And his hands started giving out on him. And I remember coming home one day, and he's at the workbench right outside of our front door, and he's cutting up this 2x4. And I'm like, "What are you doing, Grandpa? What are you cutting?" And he said, I'm making a paddle." And I said, "For who?" And he said, "For you." And I'll be damned if he didn't break that over me. So at the age of 10, uh, more along the age of 9, my parents split up. Um, and when my parents split up, my dad moved up to Pennsylvania. My mom stayed in town. We had visitation with my mom, but my mom really wasn't there a lot of the time. Um, she either said that she would oversleep, her alarm wouldn't go off, or she just didn't remember. The whole time I found out that she was um, using a substance, which that's where the hereditary disposition of substance abuse starts with my mom and my dad. See, my dad was an alcoholic, but he was an untreated alcoholic, and he was a drug addict, but he was an untreated drug addict. He masked a lot of his problems, and my mom did too. So at the age of 10, I wasn't really given a choice, but given more of a, if you could live anywhere, where would you live? And my dad is sitting right there, and all I wanted from life was to be with my dad, because every boy wants his dad. So I said, "My dad." Well, that's what the state had already planned. So custody was handed over to my dad. Now, I'm not going to go in the schematics of what happened in the custody case, because it's neither here nor there. But I moved up to Erie, Pennsylvania with my sister. Um, and we moved in at my dad's house, and everything was fine for a few months. And it got to a point where my dad would start showing aggression toward my sister, my young sister, my 18-month younger than me sister. And it started with, slap on the back of the head or a pressure point, and I don't remember what it led to, but it was bad. When I was about the age of 11 or 12, my dad said, "I can't handle your sister anymore. I'm kicking her out." For the first time in a very long time, or at all, I felt like I was losing something that meant everything to me. Yeah, my sister and I, we quarreled, but that was sibling rivalry. You do that all the time. But for the first part, I felt grief and loss because I was losing my sister. And so my dad packed all her stuff up, put it in the car, and we drove down an 8-hour drive. And for that whole 8 hours, I cried because I wouldn't be able to see my sister every day. I wouldn't be able to talk to her every day. I wouldn't be able to make fun of her, joke around, or poke. And that was the first time I felt grief and loss. I didn't feel it when my parents weren't there. I didn't feel it when I was made fun of at school. I felt it when my sister left. Shortly after that, my dad said, "Your sister is not my biological daughter, so I don't have a connection to her." But he didn't say it as a matter of fact. He didn't say it as an explanation. He said it very angry, and he said it to hurt me. And he admitted it to this day that he said that to hurt me. And that really did something to me because my whole life I knew my sister as my biological sister, my 100% blood. And I find out in a moment of anger that it wasn't, that she wasn't. So that started in setting this depression at the age of 12. I had a brother. I have a brother. His name's Richie. And I'm going to try and get him on the show. We'll see how that works out. But Richie and I started growing closer, but I always felt like there was this love for my brother that I wasn't getting from my dad. And I always pointed out to my dad, "I feel like you love Richie more than you love me." And he said, "No, that's not the case. You're just this, or you're just that." Later on in life, I would find out that it was true. My dad loved my brother more than me. And as a matter of fact, sorry for my language, he fucking hated me. As a kid, what did I do to deserve that? But I had this longing or this long-lasting feeling that my dad didn't like me, and all I wanted from him was love. I wanted him to love me as much as he loved my brother. I wanted him to show the same interest in me as he did my brother, but he didn't, and he never would. At the age of 13 or 14, I found a love for music. I was in middle school. Now, I was a nerd, and I tell you guys I was a nerd, but I was a nerd. I was going through changes in my body I couldn't explain. I had pimples popping up everywhere. I wasn't popular in school, didn't fit in. But I found this love for music, and I joined the marching band. And when I joined the marching band, I was like, this is where I feel like I belong. But I didn't really belong there either. I didn't feel like I fit in. And that's a hard feeling of not knowing where you fit in and trying so fucking hard to fit in, and you just don't. So I'm going to school and I'm in the marching band and I'm having fun because I'm getting away from my house. In the meantime, what people aren't seeing is that aggression that was aimed at my sister turned toward me because my dad didn't have an outlet. Well, like I said, it aimed toward me. When it aimed toward me, it started off with smacks in the back of the head. It started with pressure points. Then it went to mental and emotional abuse. I can't tell you how many times that I was told that I was gay. Cannot tell you how many times that I was told I was a fucking failure. Can't tell you how many times that I was told that I would never amount to anything at the age of 12, 13, and 14. I didn't know what amount to anything meant, but that's what was being told to me by my father. Things got so bad that when we were having dinner, my dad came in from work one day. He was drunk, and I don't remember what happened, but he grabbed me by my throat and lifted me above the air like a choke slam. And instead of holding on, he was squeezing, and he said, "I'm gonna fucking kill you." And it took my stepmom to pull his arm down. And looking in his eyes, I didn't see the dad that I know. It was somebody else. And that's where I really became afraid of my dad. It wasn't the smacks on the back of the head. It was the fact that he said he would kill me. And I didn't know if he would. So fast forward a few years, I'm 15, and my dad says, "You're going to get a job. You're going to learn responsibility." And what I felt like I was learning responsibility when I was in my marching band, when I was in school, when I was taking care of my stuff, but he wanted me to learn additional responsibility. So I got hired on at McDonald's. That's pretty cool, right? But that McDonald's is about 2 miles away, and I had to commute myself after school there. In the meantime, my dad's gone for about a week at a time. He was a truck driver. And so he's gone at a at a time, and I'm working at McDonald's, a week at a time. I'm working at McDonald's and I'm making money. I don't know what happened to that money, and I don't really care. But in the meantime, I'm being passed off to my neighbor, Ed, as if to say, "I can't handle him. You take care of him." And my neighbor, Ed, was afraid of my dad. Or so I think. I don't really know. I haven't had the opportunity to talk to him about this, but it seemed as if everybody in the neighborhood was afraid of my dad and nobody wanted to say anything. Now, Ed was an authoritarian figure, but he taught me some valuable life lessons. He taught me how to work on a car. He taught me about yard work. He taught me about hard labor. He taught me about not giving up when things get hard, even though I wanted to. And then when I was in 10th grade, living up in Erie, Pennsylvania, I came home from work on a Sunday and a Saturday. My dad was home, and I didn't go home. I went to Ed's, and I was terrified because I knew what was coming. He found out that I had gotten a bad grade on my report card, and he chased me around the neighborhood with a phone book and smacked me in the face, in the back of the head. Now, this isn't the worst of what has happened when it comes to me. He did that because it wouldn't leave any marks on me. The worst that had happened to me is he would tell me to go in the backyard and practice falling down. And that meant that he was going to come in the backyard and he was going to throw me from fence post to fence post and follow it up with an elbow to the back of the head. And then we were going to go to the garage, and the garage was made of cement, and he was going to throw me from wall to wall. I got hit with baseballs, and it didn't even matter where it hit me because he knew I wouldn't say anything. So after the phone book incident, my dad said, "I cannot handle you. I'm sending you away," just like he did my sister. Now, in this time, I was absolutely terrified of my dad. Absolutely mortified by even the thought of him. So when I moved to Maryland, it was a relief. I moved to Maryland back with my grandparents, and it was a relief. I started getting into religion, and I started working. And I started to find what I felt was a passion, and that passion was religion. I was there about a year, and I told my dad I don't want to go join the Army, because I originally said I wanted to join the Marines or the Army or wherever I would fit in. You see the theme here, fitting in. I said I wanted to be a pastor, and he said, "No, if you choose to do that, I'm kicking you out of my family." Well, I'd already lost my dad. I'd lost my mom. My sister had had been taken out of my life for years. I didn't want to lose them again. So I said, okay. But that was only when my dad was standing in front of me. He drove me down to a recruiting station where I signed a contract with the Army right there. And the only reason I signed with the Army because they were the only branch open. From that point forward, my dad took me back up to Pennsylvania. And he beat the shit out of me a lot. When he was home, he would beat the shit out of me. When he wasn't home, I was with my neighbor Ed. And that was even worse. My dad forced him to make me run 15 miles a day at a 6-minute pace. And for anybody listening or anybody watching that knows how fast that is god-awful fast. Within a month, I would tear my ACL to the point where it was almost completely torn. And I had to go to basic at the end of the month or at the beginning of the next month. I luckily had a weightlifting instructor tell my dad that he would stop doing this to me, or he would call child services on my dad because I could barely walk. And I had a week of relief before I went to basic training. In that time, everything was worse. The pain that I went through was worse. The agony that I went through with my dad was worse. The mental anguish was worse because I was getting 4 hours of sleep at night. Everything that I went through in my life up to that point was nothing compared to what my dad did to me in that month. When he dropped me off at the MEP station, which is where you get sent out to get sent to basic training, he didn't say goodbye. He didn't say I love you. It was almost as if to say, you're their problem now. He didn't say good luck. When I closed the door, he sped off. And that certified everything for me. That put a stamp of approval. Your dad don't love you. You don't care. You could go die. And he doesn't care. So that wraps up the part of my childhood trauma. Now, there's a lot more that I didn't add into there. But I felt for time's sake, this is where my childhood trauma ends. I go to basic training, and basic was super easy for me because my dad beat the shit out of me, and there's nothing that they could do to make it worse. And they didn't. I went to my advanced individual training where I would train to be a forward observer, which is you talk to mortars and you talk to artillery and you talk to jets and helicopters to persecute targets. And I was learning, but I was learning the basics. I wasn't learning the more advanced things, and that was okay. Then I get the opportunity to go to Airborne School. And Airborne School is just what it sounds like. You jump out of a perfectly good airplane at anywhere from 800 to 1,200 feet. And to me, that was one of the most ultimate highs that I could get, the ultimate adrenaline rush. My first duty station, I was assigned to 173rd Airborne Brigade in Vicenza, Italy, where there is no drinking limit. There's no drinking age. I told myself when I was a kid, you will never drink. You will never do a drug in your life, and you will never smoke. That first weekend, I broke my first promise. I will never drink. Now, I will say that from the moment that bottle touched my lips, that bottle embraced my lips, was the moment that I got addicted. That bottle of Grey Goose was what started me in my addiction. I couldn't get enough of it. I couldn't drink enough. I didn't want to stop. I wanted to drink until I was blacked out every night. I didn't want to feel the pain that I felt of being alone. I didn't want to feel the fucking pain that my dad put me through. I didn't want to feel the pain of not feeling good enough for anybody, let alone myself. So I drank to excess every fucking night. People called it the paratrooper way. The Army helped me in my addiction. It enabled me in my addiction. I would drink so much that I would show up to formation swaying back and forth at 6:30 in the morning, smelling like alcohol and going on a run for 12 miles. And they said that's what paratroopers do. It's not what paratroopers should do. So I'll go on my first deployment. My first deployment was to Jalalabad Airfield the very first 6 months. And there I learned hard lessons in trust, not to trust people, not even the men to your left or your right. Some things happened. I got in trouble. I'm not going to blame anybody for getting in trouble, but there was things that could have gone differently. In that time, I went to the highest level of our company, and his name was First Sergeant Inman, and I looked at him and I remember his name because he gave me the best advice that I hold today. And I said, "I'm sorry, First Sergeant, I made a mistake, and I continue to make mistakes, and I don't know why." And he said, "It's not what you do, it's how you bounce back from it." And that's what I hold to this day. It's not what you do, kid, it's how you bounce back from it. And I give that out to anybody that feels like they cannot stop getting in trouble. It's not what you do, it's how you bounce back from it. Anyways, I go on leave and I go home, and I was sober for 6 months for that deployment. And then I went home, and then one night I drank more than I could have drank in that whole 6 months. And I continued to drink. And I get back on that plane after 18 days, and I'm hungover from the last hangover from 18 days. And I land in Afghanistan, and I found out that I'm being sent to another location that I don't know anybody. But this location was the most hostile location in all of Afghanistan. Okay. I'm being sent to the Kunar province, to the Korengal Valley, where I would serve the remainder of my 9-month deployment. I learned a lot of valuable lessons, but in that time, I didn't care if I lived or died. I didn't have anybody to live for. My sister and I weren't talking. My grandparents weren't talking to me. My dad was pretty much non-existent in my life. My mom, I hadn't found her up to that point. I didn't care. So I did things that I know are wrong. I didn't get behind cover in some of the firefights. I left myself exposed, and had something happened to me, or my ignorance would have potentially costed somebody else their life. But I seen things on that deployment and other deployments that I shouldn't have to see, and no human being should be privy to see. I get back from that deployment, and not even 30 minutes after getting off the plane, I'm back in my room getting fucked up, drinking again. That's a surprise, right? I drank. Even after my chain of command said, "You're not allowed to drink," I found ways to drink. I was very sneaky about it. And then I met a woman named Monica in 2009. And I centered my life around her. But I started noticing things I didn't like, and I would talk to her about it. And she was 27, I was 20. And so there was an age gap there. And so she treated me like I was a child. And I didn't like that, because I've been treated like I was a child my whole life, to include being in the Army. And, but I wanted to marry this woman. She showed me parts of Italy that nobody gets to see. I wanted to marry her. I wanted her to be a part of my life. So I go to Afghanistan on my second deployment in 2010. And I told her, I said, I don't want you to not have fun. Go have fun. Don't let the fact that I'm doing my job, prevent you from having fun. She said, "No, I'm not going to have fun." I kept getting these emails or these messages saying your fiance's cheating on you. And finally I found out that she was, and it broke my heart, because I don't have anybody to live for anymore. Not a fucking soul to live for anymore. I wasn't afraid to die. I was afraid to be alone. So on that deployment, after I found out, I stopped caring. I gave up caring about myself. There were so many firefights that we were in that we were close to dying. Someone was close to being shot. Nobody was seriously injured on that deployment. 6 days before my birthday, we're driving down this road, and I'm telling my lieutenant, I said, "Hey, sir, I don't think we should be going down this road. It doesn't seem right. Something seems off. My intuition was telling me something doesn't seem right." And he kind of brushed me off and said, "Don't worry about it. We're fine." After he said fine, we blew up in that truck. I watched one of my buddies, Brian Fields, almost get catapulted out of the turret. And I grab him and I pull him down in. And when we hit, we go tail up, nose down, and then we come back down. And I am utterly mortified that my buddy, Brian Fields, is potentially dead. I'm shaking him. There's blood coming from his ears and his nose, and the worst is going through my brain. But luckily, he coughs, and I find out that he's still with us, and everybody in the truck was still with us. That is the very first time I can say that I got a traumatic brain injury. I got out of the truck, and every emotion that you can imagine going through your human body in a lifespan happened in a matter of a moment. I was happy, sad, angry. I was crying, laughing, all like that. So I messed up my knee in it, my left knee, but it ended up healing properly. I didn't, there was no abrasions to it or anything. I just had something hit it and it caused a lot of pain to me. But in that time frame, I was doing so much work on that deployment, doing so many different things, wearing so many different hats. I was stressed out to the max that I needed an outlet. I needed something to relieve that stress. And I met some amazing men that would just pull me away when they seen I was stressed. I met guys like Kyle Bam. I met guys like John De La Cruz, guys like Nick Schermeyer, guys like George Darty that would pull me away when they would see that I was at my wit's end. And those men are still my friends to this day, and I thank them to the heavens, to Valhalla, that they were there. Because if they weren't, I don't know if I would still be alive. So we ended up getting back on that deployment, and once again, 30 minutes being off the plane, I'm drinking again. But this time my drinking is magnified because I had nobody to live for. In that time frame, I ended up meeting my daughter's mom, and I'm not going to call her by name. I don't know if she wants to be called by name. But I met my daughter's mom, and I felt like it was love at first sight. And her and I started talking. We ended up dating. I met her parents, and I was like, this is the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with. So that was in 2010. 2011, in September, we ended up getting married. Shortly after that, we found out that we were going to be bringing this little girl into the world. And I said, I'm going to be a dad. For the first time, I felt a fucking sense of purpose. Like this little creature that's going to come out of her, this human being is going to change my life. While my daughter's mom was pregnant with her, I was stationed in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, under the 4th Brigade, 82nd. And I got there and I knew some people. So I felt like I wasn't alone. And I became popular with people at the lower enlisted because I was this guy that had been in the Army. I was in 2 documentaries, and they knew who I was. And the lower enlisted looked up to me, and I felt like I had this sense of purpose, right? But in the meantime, my daughter's mom said, if you don't quit drinking, I'm done. I can't do this. It's bad. I said, I don't want to lose anybody. There's that next common ground, right? I lost my dad. I lost my mom. I lost my sister. I lost myself. I don't want to lose her. So I quit drinking, but I wasn't working a fucking program. I just dry drunked it. I white knuckled it. I hated everybody and everything, but on the outside, it looked calm. It was a ticking time bomb. I go on my deployment, on my third deployment, and we go to Maiwan province in Afghanistan. And if you guys know anything about Maiwan province, that's just outside of Kandahar province, the home of the Taliban, where it was formed. And that was the worst of any deployment that I had ever been on. And I don't wish anything like that on anybody. My nerves were shot. I was running 2 and 3 missions a day, dismounted, walking with anywhere from 75 to 120 pounds on my back, depending on the mission. It averaged about 100 to 120 degrees every day. I was in great shape, but mentally I was worn out. I was done. I ended up getting really close to this man named Nick Alivis. And Nick was this just sarcastic asshole, right? He was that guy that you'd love to hate and you'd hate to love. He was just that guy. But Nick was brave. Nick was one of our minesweepers, which meant that he detected IEDs that were in the ground. And Nick did it fearlessly. Now, Nick and I had gotten to this argument, and I stopped talking to him for like a week before this week-long mission. I was angry at him. I was so fucking angry. And my pride got the best of me. My pride got in the way. And we went to go on this week-long mission, and right before step off, I go to every single person and I say, I love you, brother. I love you, brother. I love you, brother. Good luck. I get to Nick, and I didn't want to fucking say that to him. I was angry at him. Why does he deserve that? I went to sit down, and Nick came up to me and he said, I love you, brother. That was the last thing Nick would say to me alive. An hour into our mission, Nick stepped on an IED. Nick would lose both of his legs and an arm, and the only reason he didn't lose the other arm was because it was attached to the minesweeper. Nick did his job fearlessly, without question. In a sense, I think Nick knew he was going to die. But that image, everything about it, I remember it, and I see it like it was just a moment ago. I could smell it. I can taste the air. I remember the look on his face. I remember his last words. Nick would pass on the plane ride back to the hospital, and we wouldn't find out for another 3 days. That took a part of me away. That ripped a hole in my fucking chest that I've never been able to fill. I couldn't look at a picture of Nick without being absolutely, utterly destroyed. I couldn't listen to certain songs by Slipknot or Avenged Sevenfold because those are songs that him and I listened to. Every day that he died every year, his death anniversary, rips me to shreds until this past year. And I'll get into that in a little bit. So I get home, and I'm this broken man, but nobody can tell. I start drinking again because I think that I'm good enough. And I've told myself that lie many times. I'm good enough to drink, even though I've proven time and time again I'm not. And this time it gets bad. It gets bad. Just absolutely terrible. And then my daughter's mom says, You got to quit drinking or I'm leaving. I didn't want to lose her, so I quit drinking. But once again, I hated everybody, and I mean everybody. I fucking hated everybody and everything about everybody. I hated the way that you smell, even if you smelled great. I hated the way you looked because you looked different. I hated the fact that you drove a car that I didn't drive. I was just this angry person. I go on my last deployment in 2014 with the 82nd. And we didn't do anything that deployment. We provided security for Department of State. Cush job. We sat up in a hotel for 9 to 10 months. Provided guard. But the devil's hands, or the idle hands, do the devil's work. My brain started going. Do I really love my wife? Do I really want to be with her? All these thoughts start circulating. And the resounding no is I don't love her. I love her because she's my daughter's mom, but I'm not in love with her. And then when I went to tell her that, everybody and their mom found out. Everybody hated me. I had nobody. So I get home from that deployment. In the meantime, we're on the process of getting separated, and I meet somebody in that time frame. And I waited 2 days to drink. But when I did drink, I drank a lot. I drank a handle of Jameson and a 30 rack to myself in the barracks by myself. I didn't have anybody to live for. This little girl that I love, I'm about to pack her stuff up, and her and her mom are going to move down to Georgia. And I'm not going to have access to my daughter anymore. I'm not going to have the ability to tuck her in. I'm not going to have the ability to see her go to school. I'm not going to have the ability to do all these things, and that tore me apart. I didn't want to be alive anymore, but I didn't necessarily want to live, or I didn't want to die. So December 12th, I pack up my daughter's mom's stuff and my daughter's stuff, and we drive down to Fort Benning, Georgia, where her mom is and her stepdad. And I'm unloading stuff out of this trailer, and I'm about to leave, and words have never haunted me more than my daughter looking at me in the face and saying, "Dad, don't go. Don't go, Dad." I didn't want my daughter to have to go through what I went through as a kid, and I'm doing it to her. I'm fucking doing it to her. I said the same thing to my dad when I was a kid. "Dad, don't go. I want you here." I felt like the worst person in the world. That 8-hour drive back to North Carolina, I cried every moment of it. I don't remember hitting highways. I don't remember any of that. My brain was on autopilot. All I knew is I needed to get home where I felt safe. In that time frame, my then girlfriend was waiting on me, and I'm not going to say her name. But everybody around me knew that she was detrimental to me. But nobody said anything. We ended up getting married the day that I got my divorce. Mere hours after I got my divorce from my daughter's mom. I didn't take any time for myself. I just moved on. So in that time, our relationship was toxic, just absolutely toxic. I hated her, she hated me, but we thought we loved each other. So I got promoted to staff sergeant, which I never thought I would, right? And my duty station availability opened up, and I handed my list to my next wife, and I said, "Where on this list would you like to go?" And she said, "Alaska." "Sounds great, new start." I said, "Sounds good." So we made our way up to Alaska in January 2017. It would take her a matter of months to get a job. It would take me a matter of months to find out that I had traumatic brain injury and I wasn't functioning like a human being. I was sober at the time. I didn't want to put any substances in my body. I wanted to be a better role model for her kids and for my soldiers. But I found out that she was cheating on me while I was at work. And that really did something to me. It changed me. I was an emotional roller coaster during that time. I was working so hard on taking care of myself because I couldn't function like a normal human being. But the words, "your emotions are too much for me," ripped me to shreds, took me from this person that I thought I was, and completely diminished my value right in front of my face. Cinco de Mayo, 2018, I relapsed. And I relapsed hard. She didn't live with me at that time. I didn't have anybody to live for. I didn't want to live. And I wanted to die. I drank for a month straight, every day, all day. If I went to work, I was sober during work, but I was hungover. I put a smile on my face because that's what people needed to see out of me. But I wanted to die. I wanted it to be done. I was so sick of feeling the pain that I felt my whole life. Every waking fucking moment of my life. It was emotional pain, mental pain, or physical pain, or a combination of all of them. I was so sick of being told I wasn't good enough. I was so sick of being told that you're too much. I'm so sick of being told that you'll never amount to shit. I wanted it to be over. June 1st, 2018. I went out to Jim's Creek up here in Alaska. Very beautiful location. I went with a friend of mine. And I told myself, you will reach out. You will reach out to somebody. And if they answer their phone, like they said they would, your plan will end. You won't go through with it. And I sat and I made 32 phone calls. Out of that 32 phone calls, not a single person picked up. I felt absolutely alone in that moment. Felt like nobody cared. Nobody gave a shit about me. Everybody in the world said, if you need an ear, reach out. Nobody picked up. In hindsight, I reached out to the wrong people. People that I felt cared about me, but they really didn't. They showed me no value. I didn't mean anything to them. So I drank 5 bottles of alcohol. And I took my truck and drove it down the highway, down the Glen Highway, into Chugiak. And I ran my truck into a tree going 70 miles an hour. I wanted it to be over. I wanted the alcohol to knock me out, or the concussion to knock me out, and the alcohol to drown me when I vomited. I wanted it to be over. When I woke up in the hospital, my ex-wife was there. And she said, you're so fucking stupid for doing this. And I needed compassion. I needed empathy. I didn't need that. And that put me further into my depression. I had a good buddy named Jeremy Shadewald. And he took me into his home and he took care of me. My face was all fucked up. He took care of me. And I looked at him and I said, I really need some help, man. Things aren't right. So I checked myself into the J-Bear Hospital, the Joint Elmendorf Richardson Hospital. I said, I tried to commit suicide 2 days ago. I really need some help. So I did inpatient for 11 days. And that 11 days, I learned so much. And then I did 11 days outpatient. And you would think after that, like I'd learn, right? Well, I get divorced in October. October 5th, actually, was my divorce date. And shortly after that, I met my now wife. Her name is Michelle. And I will say Michelle has been the best person in my life. I've learned so much from her, not just about life, but about how to love and how to love myself. And my wife looked at me and said, even when you cannot love yourself, I will be there and I will love you until you can love yourself. And I'm so blessed to have her part of my life. So all this time I'm sober from that the 2nd or 3rd of June all the way up until the 4th of July 2019. In that time frame, I had been medically retired from the Army for traumatic brain injury. So I was going through some trauma there. I felt like I didn't know where I belonged. And like the Army just said, you're broken. We don't fucking need you anymore. You don't serve a purpose to us. Go, leave. And I was dabbling with marijuana a little bit. And I realized I liked it too much. So I couldn't do it. I couldn't smoke anymore. I ended up getting a job at the airport, customer service. I had a job, I had a purpose, but I hated everyone. If I seen a customer, I hated them. I was the most angry person that I could be. I envisioned myself physically harming people, if not worse. I was told by a counselor, that's perfectly normal, just don't do it. How is it normal watching a vision where you put an axe in somebody's head? To me, that wasn't normal, but I lived with it and I kept going. July 4th, 2019, I fed myself that lie for the very last time. I said, I'm good enough to drink. And my wife said, are you sure? Because I know you've been sober. And I know you said bad things happen when you drink. I said, yeah, it's the environment. I was in a bad environment when I was drinking last time. So that's why I'm good now. I'm with somebody I actually love. That's why I'm good now, right? Like the substance chooses to be okay because of who I'm with or the environment I'm with. I was feeding myself a lie, compounded by lies. So I said, look, I'm going to have one tonight, and that's it. After one, I said, I think I'm going to have another. I'm fine. I'm good. Well, that one led to 5 that night. Then the next night, it led to more, even more, even more. Next thing you know, I'm back in my full-blown addiction. Harder than before. Harder than ever before. I would go to work and I would drive home to the gas station and I'd pick up a bottle and I'd get home and I'd crack it open and drink. In that time frame, I was doing things that I'm not proud of. I wasn't faithful to my wife. I broke her trust so many times. I didn't physically cheat, I emotionally cheated many times. And there's no amount of apology that I could say that would make it better. December 7th, 2019 was the worst night of my life. I came home from work, had a long day at work, and I just wanted to drink. That's all I looked forward to on my weekends was drinking on Friday. But I drink every day, so why was Friday any different than any other day? So go and get 2 bottles of my drink of choice, and I get home and start drinking from the moment I step in that door. And my wife said, okay, it's enough. That's enough. And I said, no, I'm not done yet. She said, it's enough. Not done yet. And then I don't remember anything. Blacked out. And I came to and I'm standing outside of my house with no shirt on. I lost 2 hours of my life like that. I walk inside, the house is a disaster, and my wife is laying on the floor. I'm angry. I don't know why I'm angry, but I'm angry, and I grab my keys and I drive off. I drive out to Mirror Lake, and I'm sitting in the parking lot of Mirror Lake, and I fall asleep in the car. And I wake up, and I know I'm angry. I know that somebody pissed me the fuck off, but I don't know why or who. I can't find my phone. I can't find my wallet. So I go to my buddy Matt's house. And my buddy Matt lives in Wasilla, which is about an hour north of Anchorage. And I knock on his door and I said, I think something bad happened, but I don't know what happened. And I'm just so fucking angry and I can't figure it out. And he said, okay, well, call your wife. She's worried sick. So I call her and she said, you hit me. I said, I don't remember hitting you. She said, you hit me twice. He said, the police are looking for you. I said, okay, well, I'm going to drive back to Anchorage. When I get to Anchorage, I'm going to turn myself in. Because if my wife says that I hit her, I have to believe that because she's never lied to me. So I turn myself into APD. My wife shows up with her family. And initially they were going to take me to Providence Providence Hospital because I had these substance abuse problems and I had these mental health disorders that were untreated and undiagnosed. But I ended up going to jail. I went to Anchorage jail and I sat in jail for 20 days. In that 20 days, I hated everybody and everything. I blamed everybody for my problems. I said, my wife is the reason why I drank. She didn't stop me. You know, my roommate is the reason why I kept drinking. He could have stopped me, but in reality, nobody could have stopped me. I had an old Native man look at me, and they called me Viking in jail. If you can see, I've got a massive beard. He said, Viking, you've created all your problems in your life. Until you own up to it, your life is going to be this way. But when you accept that you had made these problems yourself, you will be free. I guess there's something about an old Native man looking at you saying that. And I sat there and I thought about it. And that was December 27th. And I thought about it. I said, you know what? He's absolutely right. I created these fucking problems for myself. I get it. December 27th is the day that I accepted I created all my problems in my life. December 27th is the day that my bail was posted. December 27th is the day that electronic monitoring came to put 2 bracelets on my ankles. One for alcohol monitoring, one for location. December 27th was the day that I was released from jail. December 27th is my sober date that I choose to recognize. I entered into Veterans Court, which is a therapeutic court up here in Anchorage and actually through the whole state of Alaska. And they take veterans that have violent crimes, drug-related crimes, and they rehabilitate them. They work a 9 to 18-month program, depending on the charge, and they get rehabilitated. In that time frame, in that 9 months, I worked so hard. I went to counseling meetings multiple times a month. I went and I did relapse prevention and moral recognition therapy. I did music therapy. I re-engaged in all my therapies that I had laxed in after I left the Army. I started going to my 12-step programs, and I really started to dive into who I was. That's why the title, Who Am I? Moral recognition therapy taught me so much, and that course saved my life because it forced me to look at everything in my life that I had done wrong up until that point. That course made me realize that I had secrets that I had to let go of to be free, and I did. Upon graduation, now let me backtrack. I wasn't allowed to go home, obviously, because of things that happened. And I have a good buddy at Emory Bowles, and that man saved my life. He took me in when I didn't have a place to stay. No questions asked. He's a family friend of my wife. But he said, if you need anything, I got you. And he took care of me. When finances were low, he made sure that I was taken care of. And he didn't have to. When the pandemic hit, he took care of me when he didn't have to. And I love that man with every bit of my soul. Emery is a fucking angel from heaven. He helped save my life. But the pandemic happened. And I was 2 months into my program. And I see a lot of people talk about how the pandemic messed with their recovery, but it only enriched mine. See, I don't like getting in front of people. I don't like talking. I didn't like talking in front of people. I didn't like sharing my story because I felt like I was the worst person in the room. I felt like nobody could get worse than Sean Young. How inflated was my ego? So I graduated the therapeutic courts, and I'm still going to my moral recognition therapy. And my therapist, his name is Ray, and Ray looks at me and he says, "Hey man, I think you'd be a great peer support specialist." I said, "What is a peer support specialist?" He said, "I don't know, but I've got a point of contact for you. Her name is Jen Galvin." Well, I contact Jen Galvin, and I'm nervous because I don't know what a peer support specialist is. I said, "Hey, Jen, I was referred to you by Ray, and I don't know if you know him or not. But yeah, Ray referred me over here, and yeah, I just want to attend your class, see what it's all about." That is my introduction to peership, to the peer support community. I took the class, and in the beginning, Jen says, "You're going to share your story, whatever you're comfortable with." In that time in my recovery, I felt like I was floating. Like I came to terms to realize that like I'm getting sober for myself. I can't get sober for anybody else. I can't stay sober for anybody else. If I get sober for somebody, I'm going to relapse when that person leaves me. Because that's what it feels like is people are going to leave me. That's what's happened my whole life. But if I'm sober for myself, if that person leaves, I am sober for myself. I love myself and I give myself so much self-love that I will not relapse because somebody leaves me. I won't pick up that bottle, I won't pick up that drug. I will stay sober because that person is not my source of my sobriety. So it comes to that last few days in peer training. And Jen says, "Okay, we're going to share our story, and I'm going to share mine. You guys are going to listen." And I was absolutely mortified. I'm in a class of 20 or 30 people. I don't want them knowing my story. I'm mortified because people are going to start to look at me and see me for the way that I see myself, this utter piece of shit. This person who doesn't deserve a breath. This person who doesn't deserve nice things. This person who doesn't deserve a nice life because of what he's done and the people that he has ruined. These people are going to see me for the failure that I feel like I am. And then Jen says, "Okay, who wants to go first?" I raised my hand and I said, "I want to go first. I have this weight that I've got to get off. And exactly what I'm doing here is what I did in that class. I spent an hour sharing my story. And at the end of it was like I was handed this key to a door I didn't know existed. I felt like this weight was lifted off my shoulders, that for once I could breathe. I felt like I had worn these sunglasses for my whole life. And for the first time, I took the glasses off and I seen life for how fucking beautiful it was. I could smell the air and I could smell how beautiful it smelled. And I could feel the wind brush against my cheek, whereas before I felt numb to all those senses. I came to life. I was then presented with this option of starting a process group for veterans for our alumni program, the Alaska Therapeutic Court alumni, because we didn't have one. And I needed a place to fit in because, once again, I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. And I inserted myself into this program. And I said, give me responsibility. That's what I need. And I was handed this responsibility to be a facilitator for the veterans. I started this group, and for 2 years, this group has been going strong, and I learned something every Wednesday and Saturday that I hold a group. I learned something about my participants. I learned something about myself from something that they said or something that I said. I have been given this gift of recovery that I utterly so desperately want to give away. I want somebody to feel the love that I feel. I want somebody to feel how good I feel. I want somebody to be able to look at themselves and see themselves as a gift, as a blessing. I don't want them to look at themselves and say, I am worthless. I am not anybody. I don't want people to say that they are a piece of shit or hopeless, because they are beautiful. They can get sober. They can maintain their sobriety. And I'm here for that. I sat on my peer support certificate for almost 2 years. And I was terrified once again, because people are going to see me for how I see myself. This board of people that don't know me, that just see this profile, this packet, are going to look at me and they're going to say, he's not worth it. He's worthless. He's hopeless. But April of this past year, of this year, 2022, I started working on my certification packet. And I was so scared filling out this paperwork. I was nervous. And one of the things you have to do is you've got to hand in your packet to a mailroom. And as I'm driving to the mailroom, and I'm like, I have this packet in my hand, and I'm looking at it, and I say, you're fucking worthless. You are not, you're hopeless. You're a hopeless case. They don't care about you. Nobody cares about you. It's just going to get rejected. And that's what the intrusive thoughts kept coming in my brain and telling me. And they say, you can turn around now, man. It's not too late. But I kept going, and I got to that mailroom, and it was just me turning everything over again. And I turned it over. And when I turned it over, there was this freeing feeling. But my brain got in the way. And I was like, it's turned in, but they don't have to accept me. They're not going to accept me, because I don't even accept myself. And I called the board and I said, hey, it's been about 2 weeks and I'm just trying to see the process and see where it's at. And they say, Mr. Young, you're certified. You're just waiting on your certificate. My brain kept going. My brain kept saying, you're fucking worthless. It's not true. They're lying to you. Well, if you can see behind me, that's my certificate. I'm a certified peer support specialist. I worked hard for it. I worked so hard. I jumped so many obstacles, and I jumped over so many hurdles. I did things that I thought were good in my recovery that ended up being a pitfall. I ended up trusting people that, in hindsight, I shouldn't have trusted, and I should have listened to my gut. I missed opportunities that I should have taken. But in retrospect, I can't should on myself, because if I should on myself, I'm just going to continue to lead myself down this road. So, in hindsight, the message I want to leave to anybody who's watching this, anybody who may know me, who may not know me, anybody who is watching this and they want recovery, but they don't know how to do it. Recovery is hard. The first step is the easiest. The first step, saying I've got this problem, is the easiest. But going at it holistically, working on your mental health, your emotional health, working on your sobriety and your recovery, and learning these recovery skills and the different recovery pathways. It's hard, but just know that is worth it in the end. There is no end. There is no final destination, because it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. It's about the lessons you learn along the way, the lives that touch you and the lives that you touch. It's about what you can give away. It's about what you have been given. Life has not been easy for me. Even in recovery, life isn't easy, because life still happens. But you got to learn to live life on life's terms. Once you become acceptant of the fact that you are exactly where you're supposed to be in the spectrum of your life, that is when you're going to start to feel free. And I'm not going to throw any 12-step knowledge on you. I'm not going to sit here and try and read out of the big book at you, because that's not what I'm about. I'm about practical application. But what I will say is, if you are in 12-step program, if you're looking at a 12-step program, if you've got a big book, page 417 saved my life. It's all about acceptance. I want to thank you guys for taking this last hour, a little bit over an hour, to listen to me talk about my recovery. I want to thank you guys for taking this time to hear my story. And I want you guys to know that I don't know you, but I love you. And if you need anything, I'm always here. You can comment down below. There's a Facebook page that I have on my link tree. You can email me there. You can send me a direct message there. I have a TikTok that's in the link tree. You can hit me there. You can find me there. But don't feel like you're so far gone that you cannot recover, because we do recover. And I'm living proof. A man like me that should have been thrown away years ago, I'm living proof that it works. And I'm not going to sit here and say, if I can do it, you can do it, because everybody's circumstances are different. But I will say that I did it, and I continue to do it every day. And I need to show up just like I'm showing up now for everybody. So thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. Thank you for taking the time to let me get into your airwaves. I love every single one of you. And I cannot wait for episode 3. This has been an absolute blessing. Now, as every YouTuber does, and I hate doing this, but go ahead, like and subscribe, and turn on that notification, because you're going to get notified every time I have new content out. And it's going to be posted in Facebook, and it's going to be posted wherever other social media I decide to run. So thank you guys so much for this opportunity. I love you guys. Have a nice day.